Hi, you guys. Okay, so I think I want to change my mic. So please be patient. Give me 1 second. I'm going to grab my mic. I'm so sorry. All right, you guys. Let me Great. You guys can hear me, I hope. All right, so let's get into this whole thing. I did the first part of this on women, and I think a lot of people were like, well, is she going to talk about young men and things like that? And I was explaining to you guys then that I was doing a 2-part series. Well, I should say I was doing males and females in separate parts, and then I'm going to do a third part, which is protection and identification, so that we can protect, identify, and deal with adults that have suffered from child sexual abuse. And so I'm going to throw out a bunch of information in the description box. I have put a significant amount of research, several articles, some PDFs from different government authorities, just a hodgepodge of information regarding child sexual abuse and some of the things that we see specifically with Black male children, and some of the things we see manifest themselves. Because in my third part of this series, I want to go into how all of this bleeds into a lot of the behavior we see in the Black community. So case in point, a young man who was sexually assaulted as a child runs a higher risk of getting a woman or a young woman pregnant as a teenager. And the Black community has the second to highest rate of teen pregnancy in the country. So the same thing last time when I was talking about the women who are sexually abused when they're little girls, how that behavior manifests itself as adults. So what we're really seeing is that a lot of this behavior that's common in our community has a direct correlation to the levels of abuse that people suffer in their youth. And so, like I said, today we're specifically going to deal with Black men. I'm going to go to my research. I'm going to talk through some things with you guys, and then we're going to just have a conversation. I want to say hi to everybody. Hi, Ricky. Hi, Joseph. Hi, Dark Prophet. Hello, Daniela. No, I didn't hear about that, Joseph, but it doesn't surprise me. I think as women, we shouldn't bring men around our children. That's my personal opinion, but all women don't think like that. So let me go ahead because I'm going to take a look at my computer. Because if you guys remember from my chill live, I rubbed the lens of my webcam crazy. So I'm actually doing this on my computer. And I'm just going to go to my research. Okay. So first, let's talk about what the risk factors are and what rates we're seeing young men being sexually abused in the Black community. I want to deal with that first. So some of the risk factors for our young men who may be abused in our community is that first and foremost, family structure. So when we talk about preservation of the family and the nuclear family in our community, this is so much bigger than, you know, male and female issues. This is actually something that can protect our children, because the biggest factor, the biggest risk factor for children who are sexually abused, the top one is that the family is broken. So children who live with two married biological parents have the lowest risk of abuse. If nothing else, if you create children, is a reason to do that within the confines of a marriage, because if there are two biological parents in the home, that child has the lowest risk of abuse. Two married biological parents. The risk increases when children live with step parents or a single parent. Children living without either parent, foster children, are 10 times more likely to be sexually abused than children that live with both biological parents. And when we think about this, as far as foster children go, we see why our Black boys and Black children in general are at such high risk for abuse. We have a community with 70% single parent homes, woman-led homes. We also have the highest per capita rates of children in foster care. We're looking at almost 25 to 30% of our children in foster care, only behind white children, although the numbers have gone down from 2006. Still, we're only behind white children, but their children outnumber ours. Do you know what I mean? 70 to 13%. So we have huge numbers of Black children in foster care. All of those children are 10 times more likely to suffer from sexual abuse. Gender is also a major factor in child sexual abuse. We know that females are 5 times more likely to be abused than males. However, the average male who is abused is young. 8% of victims are 12 to 17. Those are male. But then there's 26%, almost 30% of victims under the age of 12 are male. And we also find that male children are abused more violently. So they're abused younger, and their abuse is more violent. Their abuse is also perpetrated by other men most often. So men are the aggressors of this abuse, and we'll talk about that profile in just a second. So although women children are abused at much higher rates, when a male child is abused, that abuse is younger. It means that it's greatly more impactful to the child, and that abuse is more violent. It is also often same-sex abuse. And all of those things play a factor in how our young men that are abused come out. And remember, we're talking statistics of just what is reported. Imagine what is not being reported with our young men in the community. Race and ethnicity are also an important factor in child sexual abuse. African American children have almost twice the risk of sexual abuse than white children. So overall, our community, because of the color of our skin, because of the high prevalence of single-family homes in the community, because of the high concentration of our children in foster care, our children are more likely to be abused. Our young men are likely to be abused before the age of 12 at a rate of 30%. More violent abuse, more aggressive abuse, younger ages. This is what's plaguing young Black boys today. I want to go to sexual abuse of children, sex, race, and age-dependent variations. So there was a study done by DeJong, Emmett, and Harvada. And in this study, they looked at sexual assault on victims that were under 18 years of age. They analyzed that data with respect to race, sex, and age. Most of the victims were female. Obviously, 82% of those victims were female, but we're going to look at this the 17% that were male. The children ranged, sadly, from ages 6 months old. These are children who were sexually molested from 6 months old to the age of 16 years. The male victims were significantly younger than the female victims. Between the ages of 7 and 10 was the target range for raping male children. Their abuse was more violent. They had more evidence of trauma. So male children had higher rates of expressed trauma even, perhaps because of the severity of the abuse, perhaps because of the people aggressing against them, but that they were more greatly affected even than the females by that abuse upon initial presentation. The younger victims were more likely than the older victims to be assaulted repeatedly. So let's put all this together. We know that violence against young boys is more aggressive. It's more violent. We know that they exhibit higher trauma upon initial presentation. And little boys, because they are molested younger, are in a group of abused children that also are repeatedly abused. They're abused over and over and over again, not just once or twice. Okay, let's take a look at some more stats. Are there certain factors that make a child more vulnerable to sexual abuse? We are looking at children that are passive, quiet, troubled, lonely, from single parent or broken homes. These people are seeking out little boys who are particularly trusting, they are proactive in establishing trust with those children. And they also are proactive about extending trust to the victim's family. And this is where parental advocacy comes in, right? Because we have women that are letting men, and I'm going to pick on men because yes, women abuse, but I'm going to go into some stats later that show that it's about 12% of child molesters are female. So we are specifically looking at, because this is normally same-sex aggression when it's young Black boys being sexually abused, individuals who are preying on situations where children are in vulnerable positions, and we have mothers that are letting these men come into the home and abuse the little boys in the home. Children in a lower socioeconomic status household are 3 times as likely to be identified as a victim as child abuse, as are disabled children. Children who witness or are the victims of other crimes are more likely to be sexually abused. This is really painting a picture why our young boys are targets, right? Poor families, broken families, single parent households, exposed to other sorts of traumas. It's understandable why our boys are a target, because of the small percentage of males in comparison to females who are abused, it's Black boys that are sexually abused the most. This is a conversation that's uncomfortable to have when we think about male sexual abuse, but it's a conversation that we need to have. And we also have to look at how, as a community, we say that sex and promiscuity in our male children, kind of pulling from slavery, right, is indicative of something positive, right? It's positive for a man to have a lot of sex. Young boys are sexual. They are attracted to women. We have little boys, we'll encourage them to give women kisses. We'll encourage them to view women sexually. So when a child is acted upon, they are not a victim. When they're reacted upon, they're not a victim. When they're acted upon by somebody of the same sex, there's a lot of shame associated with them. So we have boys that are growing up that are not getting help. We don't want to talk about the fact that almost every Black woman, over half of Black women, are sexually abused. Let's talk about the fact that almost 15% of our little boys are sexually abused. What's reported? Repeatedly sexually abused at young ages. So we have to be able and willing to have those conversations. Race and ethnicity are a factor in identified sexual abuse. Again, because African American children are twice as likely to be sexually abused. The risk for such sexual abuse is tripled for children whose parents are not in the labor force. Again, if you have parents that are not working, we're looking at single parent homes, underemployed, non-employed parent homes. These are homes where little boys are being raped, not just penetrated, but other types of sexual abuse. Because there's a variety, right? There's a lot of ways that a person can violate a child. And these little boys are growing up into men that are actively engaging in our community. And in that, it's very dangerous. I'm sorry, you guys, I'm not looking at the comment section yet. But I will. Hi, Frantonio. Let's talk about what sexual abuse in males can look like, other than penetration. Okay? That could be imitation of sexual acts. And this is something I feel is often done with, especially with male children. I mean, we sexualize female children, but with male children, I feel like it's even worse, right? When a little boy grabs a lady's butt or breasts or kisses another little girl, and we encourage that behavior, we think it's cute. But the imitation of the sexual acts is not cute. They're children. And in the Black community, we have a sort of normalized dysfunction where encouraging children to behave like adults is considered okay. But what we don't realize is when we okay that behavior, when a predator comes in, it is easier for them to coerce the child into engaging into other behaviors because we've already co-signed the foundation. Music videos, highly sexualized a lot of times, a lot of media that parents watch, a lot of inappropriate content for children. Desensitizes them when a person who is sick comes into the home, they can then attack that little boy who's already been told he's supposed to be sexual, already been told he's supposed to be attracted to women, already been made aware of his private parts in a way that's inappropriate, already been made aware of the sexual dynamic between male and female, already been told as a little boy and encouraged as a little boy to be sexual, that this is part of his manhood. So then when an aggressor is acting on a young Black boy who are the prime targets for child sexual abuse, they're primed and prepped by who? By their families, by their mothers, by their uncles, by their fathers. They're primed and prepped for a sick person to take advantage of them. And that is why we have such a high incident of male child sexual abuse in the Black community. And again, these are individuals that are growing into functional adults. They're going into semi-functional adults, active adults, adults that are reproducing, adults that are in the dating pool. These are the teenage males that are impregnating teenage girls. Because remember, sexual abuse ties to erratic behavior as a teenager, increases the risk that that male child will get somebody pregnant as a teen. Black community has the highest rates of that. So when we start having these conversations about the various things that are wrong within our community, a lot of these can be traced back to the fact that we are not protecting our children. Mind you, while we have all these people, male and female, in the Black community talking about tearing down the familial structure and co-signing not having two biological parents in the home with the children, that those are the exact households that are at a higher risk. Those households without that dynamic. A child with two biological parents in the home that are married is the safest child. And those are the children that are not highly represented in the Black community. And so then when we look at our young boys getting raped, going into young men who have deviancies, going into young men who are getting girls pregnant at the teen years, going into young men that are violent and have other tendencies because they have been abused as children, what we are looking at is the perpetuation because we fail to protect and put our children first. We want to put our sexual desires first. We want to put our feelings first. We want to put what we do and don't want to do first, but we don't recognize that the Black community is a prime stomping ground. It's a prime patch of fruit, ripe for the picking of child bodies because of how we function and interact with each other. And our boy children are not excluded from this. In fact, our boy children are raped the most, are sexually assaulted the most. They are the most in consideration of their demographic of males, right? Female children are abused the most, but of all male children who are abused, it's our Black boys that are the prime targets. It's our Black boys that are ending up in foster care. It's our Black boys that are being raised in single parent homes. And they are prime targets. And our community is ripe. It's ripe for pedophiles to come in, and that is what they are doing. They are coming in and they're coming for our kids. So as adults, when we're making these choices, we have to be pragmatic about the choices that we're making. We have to look at these stats and make sense of these stats and understand that the perpetuation of the cycle of dysfunction, of not protecting our children, not encouraging two-parent households with biological parents and them raising children, is making our community a prime stomping ground for pedophiles. And the leaders, the future leaders of our community and heads of our households, little boys, are targets. They are being raped just like the girls. And they're not getting the treatment they need because they're boys, because what's happening to them is okay, because they should like it, because they should be sexual, because they should be receptive, because they wanted it, right? Let a little boy have sex with an adult. They wanted it. Let a little boy's little penis get hard because he's been acted upon. He wanted it. It's healthy. He's male. So we're not getting them help, because when we talk about these stats for male child rape in the Black community, we are only talking reported stats, and y'all know that our people do not report. Not in any sort of numbers. So these estimates are greatly below. These reported estimates are not really representative of what is going on in our community. If we are honest, if we're having an honest conversation about it. Let's talk about abused boys, battered mothers, and male involvement in teen pregnancy. Because I want to talk about how these people, how they form, how these little boys who are raped and ignored in the Black community, little boys who are told that they are sexual beings. So then when an adult is inappropriate sexually toward them, we think that this little boy had something to do with it. And he is not allowed to be a victim. He's not allowed to get help because he wanted it, right? He's a boy. Boys mature so fast, so they can't be violated. Despite the fact that the evidence shows that they are highly traumatized by these experiences are mostly violent against them, and they are often other men, not just women, but other men that are engaging in these behaviors with these little boys. So let's talk about how the single parent home, where a woman is being abused, the child is being molested, how this ties into teen pregnancy and the creation of another single family home where there are vulnerable Black children. There was a study that looked into this. It looked into the relationship between boyhood exposure to physical abuse, sexual abuse, or a battered mother and subsequent risk of impregnating a teenage girl. It looked into that correlation. It was something nobody had looked at before. So what they did is they set up in a primary care clinic. And about 5,000 men were analyzed. They gave information on the youngest female they had impregnated, their own ages at the time. They gave information about their exposure to physical or sexual abuse or battered mothers. They calculated the prevalence and adjusted the odds for having impregnated a teenage girl according to those 3 adverse childhood experiences. How many Black households have this dynamic? Single mother in an unhealthy relationship, abused child. What are we seeing? High teenage pregnancy rates. This raises their sexual activity young, their irresponsible behavior young. It's not their fault per se, right? Because they are victims of abuse. They have been exposed. 32% of those respondents had been abused. 15% of those male respondents, specifically sexually. 11% had battered mothers. There was an increased risk of involvement in teenage pregnancy by 70% from these demographics. Sexual abuse as a boy at age 10 years or younger, which is what we know the targets for these molesters of little boys are. They are going for little boys under the age of 12. So sexual abuse with violence. Sexual abuse as a boy at the age of 10 years or younger increased the risk of impregnating a teenage girl by 80%. Sexual abuse with violence increased the risk by 110%. Do you hear what I'm saying? We know that boys are violently abused more. We know that Black boys are front and center for sexual abuse. If they are sexually abused, their chances of impregnating a teenage girl at a young age increases 80%. If they are sexually abused with violence, basically, they're going to get somebody pregnant. 110% increase of chance that they will get somebody pregnant. It's almost a sealed deal. When we talk about the Pookies and the Rayways, when people are making fun of young men who are getting multiple women pregnant, having babies very young, lots of kids, these are often abuse victims. There is a reason in the Black community these men and women are walking around acting like broken people. That is because they are broken people. And we are failing as a community to protect them when they are young. We are failing as a community to protect them while they are young. And then we look at a behavior as teenagers and adults, and we want to point fingers. When the reality is somebody failed when that person was young. We are currently failing with our little ones right now. And we have to do better. And that is why I side-eye and I question anybody who discourages Black people from marrying, from raising their child in a home with 2 biological parents. When we see that our demographic is the target because we lack that. We see that those children are more vulnerable in our community. Our girls are raped the most. Our little boys are raped the most. Our children are the most sexually abused of everybody else's kids. And yet we will sit here and encourage people and make them feel it is okay to not be in a home raising their own children together. We will sit here and tell people to have sex and they can effectively parent from outside of the home. We will sit here and tell women they don't need men. They could do this by themselves. We will sit in and we will encourage young women to hold fathers out of the child's life. We are perpetuating an unhealthy attitude toward child rearing, which is making our children victims of some of the most vile acts, which is opening the door. It's opening the door for a broken community at the adult level, because these little abused boys are growing into men, dysfunctional men. This is the same thing I said when I was speaking about women and sexual abuse in women. We have 60% of women being sexually abused, growing into dysfunctional women. And now we have men being sexually abused, growing into dysfunctional men. It's problematic, to say the very least. It's problematic to our community. Let's look at a little more data. We know that when a young man is sexually abused, the chances he will engage in risky sexual behavior and get a girl pregnant as a teen raises by 80%. Sorry. We know that if a young man is abused before the age of 10 with violence, and this is about the age that most sexual abuse against males happens, that his chance of getting a teenage girl pregnant increases by 110%. So then we look at births of Black women. "39 Black teenage females out of every 1,000 give birth." 39 out of every 1,000. In comparison to their white counterparts, who are at 19 births for every 1,000 represented. And on par with Latina teens, who is the other demographic that has high sexual abuse rates, at 42 births per 1,000 teens. It's problematic. There's a problem here, and we really have to address it. The child abuse rates by ethnicity in the United States, our community had the second highest rates of child abuse per capita, per 1,000 children. 14 out of every 1,000 children in the Black community was sexually abused in 2016. In 2016, out of every 1,000 children, 14 were sexually abused, and that is what was reported. We know that around 14 to 15% of those abused children were male. We know that the majority of male children are abused before the age of 12 violently. Hold on one sec. Am I blurry? I see your comments. How blurry am I? Let me look at myself. I can't see what you can see. Yeah. I have to get another camera. I told you guys I messed up my camera. So I have several, but I wanted to do this on a bigger surface. So I was using my computer I have a brighter camera that I use for my pre-recorded videos, and I've destroyed my webcam because I tried to clean it, and that was stupid. So this is where I really want to kind of just leave this off, okay? I just want to remind you guys that we have 32% of our children in foster care. Foster care children are 10 times more likely to be abused. Male Black children are the targets for abuse. There are higher targets for abuse above all other male children. I want to remind you guys that children in homes where they have two biological parents are the least abused, and our community is the least represented of all communities when it comes to that demographic, which is exactly why we see such high rates of sexual abuse in our community. And although it makes people uncomfortable, and I know that it does, hold on, let me bring you guys closer. Although I understand that it makes people uncomfortable to have these conversations, it is essential that we have them. It is essential that we do not support people who want to further break down the Black nuclear family. It's essential that we do not get behind rhetorics that tell people it is just as good to have a parent outside of the home who is active as a parent inside of the home, because the stats about sexual abuse are telling us different. The stats about sexual abuse are telling us that when those parents are not those biological parents are not in a home with the child, it raises their chances of abuse. Raises. Our children are already twice as likely to be abused than any other child. And we are seeing the results of this abuse carry on into the adulthood age and the behavior that these individuals engage in. And I keep saying this because I want to paint a picture. Because something that I am realizing as I get older is that these things are not isolated. When we talk about problems in the Black community, we want to talk about things that are happening at the adult level. But we aren't focusing on the people that grow into adults, the children. There are little things we can do. We can be more responsible as adults. Be more responsible with our bodies. Have a sense of responsibility where we are putting our children ahead of our own selfish interests and desires. To help circumvent these sorts of issues. We're talking about tackling teenage pregnancy and single motherhood in the Black community, but we want to ignore the fact that 60% of women are sexually abused, that 15% of the little boys that we have are sexually abused. That these people are growing up to be adults and teenagers who engage in risky behavior and continue the cycle of creating a pool of individuals that are vulnerable. But we want to fight amongst and bicker amongst each other as adults. And I'm thinking to myself, are we all stupid or crazy? Because there are things that we can do that can be effectual, that have nothing to do with fighting each other, but have everything to do with working together, and not for our own personal good or gain, but for the good of the community. And I think that that's really essential, that it be for the good of the community, that it be for the good of children, since they cannot protect themselves. They cannot protect themselves, and we are the people that have to step up to the bat for this. And you can see all of the risk factors are adult controlled. All of the risk factors that leave young Black boys susceptible to abuse are in the control of the adults in their life. Every last risk factor. So that means that as adults, we have to step up. In part 3 of this series, which I hope to put out next week, I want to talk specifically about what we can do as a community to lower the rates of child sexual abuse in our community and help develop individuals, because they won't be getting sexually abused at such high rates. We can then hope to develop individuals that are healthier in other ways as well. And this is just one step that we can take to repairing our community and to ensuring that the next generations of adults coming up are healthier adults, more rounded adults. Do you know what I mean? So that we can stop seeing the cycles that we see within our community. When we talk about the issues our community has, a lot of these are seated in our little ones. And their environment are things that we can control. We are creating them. We can control these factors, and we need to try. So that is where I stand on the research that I did and my personal feelings about abuse of little Black boys in the Black community. We have to stop over-sexualizing our little boys. They are children too. They might be male, but they're little kids. And we cannot protect them if we are raising them to be sexual beings and to equate their masculinity to their sexuality. Because when they are harmed, they will not recognize the harm for what it is, but the trauma will be the same. It is something to consider. Hi, pretty sassy Libra. Hello, poetic. So, let me just look through your comments before I go. Yes. Danielle, I agree. Hi, Janine. So with that said, I'm going to go. I want to talk about this. I'm going to tell you guys a story of a real person, okay? A real person that I knew for most of my life. He was sexually abused. He lived in a house with, I think he had 5 other siblings. There might have been 5 or 6 of them. I can't remember if it's 5 or 6. I think if I counted, but I'm not about to stop and count. 5 or 6 siblings, boys and girls. The father was the biological father of one of the children. The mother was a nurse. Okay. The father raped all 3 boys and 2 of the girls. One girl managed to escape because she was mean as hell. So this man grew up, he was a drunk. He was raped pretty violently. His sister told me she recalls blood coming out of his rectum. They were also physically abused in that home. He grew up to be an alcoholic. And he died an alcoholic. I know the story of another woman about my age. She was inappropriately touched in a foster home that she lived in her whole life. And she knows that the man that touched her touched other children that were there. I edited a book for a woman who also was a child from a foster home. And she was inappropriately touched in several of the homes that she was in. I hear stories of men and women who are molested as an adult woman, and it breaks my heart. I look at how these people are so broken and damaged as human beings. And it hurts my soul. And when I look at children, and I don't want to get upset, but when I look at children, when I look at my little ones, I'm so careful with my children. And a lot of people think I'm very uptight. My first husband thinks I'm very uptight. And one of the reasons I am is because I'm a mother. And I have met so many people who have been sexually abused. It is shocking. Black people, men and women. And some of them are on therapy. You know, I'm upper middle class. So these are upper middle class people. Therapy, on drugs, mentally ill, drug problems, alcoholics, problem attaching to their children. And this is all because somebody failed them as children. And so I feel like we really have to take this seriously as a people. We cannot encourage behavior in our community, such as reproducing out of wedlock, such as single parent homes, such as irresponsible sexual behavior. We cannot promote behaviors. We cannot promote a flippant gender war. We cannot tell men that they can be outside of the home and their children will be just as safe. We cannot tell women that those little boys and little girls do not need fathers. We have to get our people back to tradition because our children are targets for this. They're targets. And we are sitting here and we're ignoring it, and we're online being stupid, talking about we don't want to get married, we don't like each other, faking a gender war, but there are real life children out here that are being violated and raped over our foolery as adults. We have to grow up. We really do. We have to grow up and get responsible. And that is really all that I have to say on the matter, is grow the fuck up. Seriously. Your kid needs a 2-parent home with biological parents to be safe. Moms have to stop putting not wanting to be alone and sex ahead of their kids. Fathers need to stop thinking that their kids are safe because they do visits and birthdays. We have to be responsible. We are creating these people and we need to be responsible for these children, or we are going to keep breeding dysfunction in our community. And we see that this irresponsibility with our children is leading to deviant behavior in our adults. So when we look at the Pookies and Ray Rays and the thought culture and the stripper culture, that's where it is coming from. This isn't an accident. This is a failure of us adults. We are failing our children, and we see that manifested in our community and cultures. And we have to stop making this behavior acceptable. It's not cute. Hi, Shelly. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and go, you guys. I want to take my kids to the library. Feel free to check out the resources I provided. We have to chastise each other in love. I'm sorry. Living by the forest, y'all, my nose is like nonstop. Hold on. I'll be right back. Okay. Oof, y'all, I'm so sorry. I'm telling you, my nose and this forest, they don't get along, but I'm not going to keep you guys, because all I will do is I will say the same thing over and over, you guys. I will be like television. I know people hate that about when I talk, I tend to repeat things over and over, but I repeat them because honestly, people are trained for repetition. The radio repeats things, the television repeats things, society repeats things, and it breeds dysfunction. And I guess when I talk, I repeat things because I know that if I say it over and over, it will stick. I don't know. I hope that we can work together. So I'm just going to repeat myself one more time. Forget this damn gender war. This is stupid. We literally have millions of Black children that we need to be worried about protecting because the dysfunction we're seeing in our adults is stemming from things that are happening to these little boys and little girls when they are young. And so it is a crazy, sick person that hates us who would encourage you to have a broken home in the Black community when they know that children in broken homes that is the biggest indicator that they will be sexually abused. And when we come from a community where 60% of our women are sexually abused, and our boys are the most sexually abused demographic of all male children, you would have to be sick and hate Black people to tell Black people to not marry and raise their own biological children in the same home. You would have to be some kind of twisted to encourage Black people to go out and engage in random sex with people so that they can produce children that will grow up in single parent homes, when we know that single parent homes have the highest rates of sexual abuse. You would have to be some kind of person to talk about a damn Pookie and Ray Ray or a teen pregnancy when we know that little boys who are sexually abused stand an 80% chance of getting a teen pregnant. Who are violently sexually abused stand 110% chance. 110%. That's a guaranteed thing of getting somebody pregnant. And then we look and it's 14 out of every one. Wait, let me look at the stat. Don't let me get it wrong. Don't let me get it wrong. And then somebody be talking about I got it wrong. When it is 40 out of every 1,000 Black little girls that's a teenager is giving birth. 40 out of every 1,000. 40. So when we start having these conversations about our issues with adults, the thought on Instagram, the stripper culture, recognize that 60% of the women have been sexually molested. When we start talking about the Pookie and the Ray Ray that's making all the Black babies, recognize that that Pookie or Ray Ray was probably molested. When we start talking about gender wars and don't marry Black women and Black women are so bad, recognize it's those broken homes where children are being molested. I'm not one to be calling people agents and this and that. Do you know what I mean? But sometimes I feel like people are very suspect. When I hear things that some people say in social media, here on YouTube specifically, I really wonder what's going on with them. I don't trust it. I don't trust it. You know, and then people will say, I'm an agent. Because I tell people to be sexually responsible, I'm an agent. Because I say be careful with your children, I'm an agent. Because I say raise your children in two-parent households, respect your body, value yourself. You're not freaking candy. You're a valuable human being. I'm an agent. Because I promote femininity and submission in women and headship and masculinity in men, I'm an agent. Me. All the things that need to go right in our community so that we can protect our kids and raise healthy individuals and be stronger as a community, and I'm the flipping agent? No, a lot of these people are agents. If anybody, whether they recognize it or not. A lot of these people, as Nyla calls them, are sleeper cells. Just freaking destructive. destructive with their rhetoric in the Black community for a check will sit up there and tell you you don't need to have a 2-parent household. You don't need a nuclear family for a check. Will sit up there and tell you that the next Black person's kid isn't your business and you don't need to care about them for a check. Will turn everything into a flippin' gender war for a check. There's a whole list of people who roll like that. They will tell you to do the most destructive things. I heard a man say he ran through 3 women in a day with a smile on his face. You sound like a walking AIDS epidemic. You sound like that fool who's going to have some kids in a single-parent home that are getting raped, that are going to produce a little boy who got violently raped as a child, got a teenage girl pregnant so that she could have a baby in a single-parent home to get raped too. Sounds like the problem with our community. But we like to pander to, support, and enjoy these people. And we need to stop with this crap. I am sorry. We have to stop. You know, I had a very sweet commenter who was like, last night when I was talking about the gentleman, talking about he's tired of masculinity, that I was picking on him and making fun of him. No, there is an attack. There is an attack on the men. There is an attack on manhood. You have the feminists trying to call everything that makes a man toxic. You have men like the one I talked about last night talking about he's done with masculinity. He wants to be protected and wined and dined. This new age gender neutral bullshit. You have little boys getting raped by other men. Grown ass men talking about you don't need to be in the house with your kids. You don't need to worry about the next person's children. There's no community. We have all these people spewing this rhetoric that is destructive. And we will find 99 ways to dismiss or validate what they say. And they suck us in with truths. They suck us in with it. Do you know what I'm saying? They say some stuff that is true. They start talking some, male advocacy stuff. Some men have feelings too stuff. Some I had a bad experience with a woman stuff, or this guy hurt me stuff, and get us trapped in. And then they go down to Crazyville and they start talking crazy. And while they're talking crazy, somebody is fucking their kids in the Black community. Did you pay attention to the one statistic I quoted? Children as young as 6 months old. Little boys under 12, violently sexually abused. But we're going to talk about, let's not worry about community accountability. Let's not worry about marriage and nuclear families. Let's not worry about 2-parent homes. Let's not worry about promoting masculinity. Let's embrace the gays. When half of these little boys, almost all of these little boys, the perpetrators are men raping these little boys in the Black community, and y'all want me to give a gay person a fucking hug? I don't care who they sleep with. No, keep them away from your kids. Try that. So I could go on a whole rant, but I'm not. I'm just going to say that we have to do better as a community with this. This is crazy. This is crazy. 60% of women in our community raped as little girls. Little boys under the age of 12 violently raped Black boys front and center. And all the behaviors we are complaining about here on YouTube can be tied to these high rates of sexual abuse in our community. We were sexualized as slaves, and we sexualize our little ones. I'm going to do a whole video on were we better off as slaves for idiots like Jesse Lee Peterson. Were we better off with our kids eating out of troughs like animals? Were we better off dying before the age of 50? 10% of us only living till 50. Were we better off starting our sexual activity at 13 when we were women? Were we better off? But here we are thinking it's cute when our little girl at 5 years old can bounce her little butt like Beyonce. That's cute. We want to applaud that. Our daughter has her hand on her hip like she's a grown woman and a backless shirt and some flipping heels on her feet. And we think that's cute. But when a grown man tries to give her the D, we're going to point to her and call her a hoe when she grows up all screwed up. We're going to encourage our little boys to be kissing on little girls. And, oh, isn't she fine? And is that your girlfriend? To a little boy. But when somebody is violently molesting that child under the age of 12, and he grows up to be Pookie or Ray Ray, we want to point fingers and cry foul. There's some mental trickery going on. I don't understand. What's going on? What's happening in our community? Y'all tell me, because I don't understand it. We're either going to be grown up or we're going to be kids. We're going to either act like adults or we're going to act like children. We're either going to fix this or we're not. You know, but we can stop having these stupid side conversations, trying to be inclusive of everybody, trying to embrace everything. Everything's not cute. Everything's not appropriate. Everything you like isn't good for you. So, you know, just running around indulging every little urge we have is not appropriate, especially if it creates an at-risk group. And right now, the at-risk group is our little ones. So I said I was not going to rant, y'all. And my nose is going to give up on me. It's going to be running and everything. And I can't do it. But I feel like there's a lot of stuff that we embrace as a community that are remnants from slavery and a lot of mindsets that we have. And a lot of things that we have normalized. I'm so sorry. I have to blow my nose. Hold on. Y'all don't want to see it. Oh, I'm so sorry, y'all. This is real out here by the forest. I'm going to have to take you guys over to the forest. So you guys know, like literally, if I walk for 3 minutes in that direction, I'm in the forest. So I can't. I'm allergic to something out here. Even though when I woke up this morning, everything was covered in ice, I'm still allergic. Nothing will kill down the pollen from these plants. But I just, you know, I feel like these are conversations that we need to have. Like I'm having this conversation on YouTube and I wish like all of us were in a room together and we could really just bounce off of each other. But there's a lot of behavior we have to stop co-signing, and co-signing doesn't always mean like literally agreeing with somebody verbally. It could be indulging in their content. It could be indulging in a certain television show. It could be not saying something, you know, to a close relative or friend. It could be the choices that we're making in our own lives with our own kids and our own family, our own promiscuity, our own mindset. It could be all those things, but there is an aspect of individuality to this in that we individually, like I need to make better decisions. You know, each of you needs to make better decisions, but there is a collective aspect to this too. And collectively, we have a problem. Collectively, we have a problem. It's an issue. I don't want to go on and on and on. I could go on and on and on, y'all. I really could, because it breaks my heart. But I'm not going to do that. When I do part 3, I'm going to talk about identifying sexual predators, risk factors, what we can do, either as parents or as people that are interacting with children, even if they're not our children, like as a community, to protect these little kids. We need to protect our young men because those are our future leaders. We need to protect our young women because those are our future mothers and supporters of our future leaders, right? The man cannot be strong if the woman that was made for him cannot support him because she's broken. We need both. We need both. And so, like, y'all, us adults, we're screwed up already, right? A lot of us are stuck in our ways, but what we can do is we can do better with our next generation. And I think that we need to focus on that and not be infighting and beefing with each other and getting into pointless conversations. I think sometimes you just have to recognize that there's a problem and move forward with accepting there's a problem. We cannot sit outside of a burning house and fight over who set the fire. We need to pick up buckets and throw water on the fire. Because while we're arguing, the house is burning down. And I feel like that's where we are right now as a community. While we're bickering and arguing, outside of this burning building, the building is burning down. And I'm trying to grab a bucket and throw some freaking water on this crap. I don't want to argue about it anymore. I just want to address the issue. I just want to address it. And I know a lot of us are in that place. So I will talk to you guys later. And thank you for joining me. I know these lives are early. A lot of people are at work, and I'm so sorry because I definitely have had people say, can I do them later in the day? Because of my schedule, it's harder for me to do them later in the day. I'm trying to like wean off of that, but I will try to do some lives later in the day so that more people can join in, because I know everybody doesn't have availability at, this early in the day to be joining in on a conversation. And I hate to leave anybody out. Bye, you guys. I'll talk to you later.